Hello, EBS viewers. Welcome to Wie de Han Swoop, Great Minds. I'm Beth Simmons. I'm a professor of law and political science at the University of Pennsylvania. By 1948, we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and this was the first time a set of human rights norms had been agreed multilaterally among all states in the world that were in existence at the time. There are some limits to taking this kind of strategy of trying to develop treaties as a way to secure human rights. One big limitation is that states have to consent to a treaty. So states choose whether or not they're going to adopt a treaty and whether or not they're going to ratify it. It's up to the state. States can ask for exceptions and opt-outs to treaties. This is by a process called making a reservation when you ratify a treaty. Korea ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but has a reservation against its article on adoption protections for children, Article 21. The United States has ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but has specified that inhumane treatment does not ban the use of the death penalty. Treaties, therefore, can be a little bit difficult to have sort of a universal effect. Only states that want to ratify the treaties will do so, and they can make these kinds of reservations to create exceptions for themselves to not be bound by certain aspects of the treaty. But treaties have some advantages too. Consent, I've named it as a problem, but it's also a strength of making international treaties. Treaties have a process of ratification, and only states that ratify treaties are bound by them. Ratification creates a public record. It creates a commitment. It creates a legal commitment, but it also makes sort of a reputational commitment at both the international and the domestic level. So it makes people begin to expect that a country is going to take a certain package of rights much more seriously. It increases enforcement possibilities, maybe, through domestic law, because where treaties have the status of law and it's specified in states' constitutions, then courts can start to enforce treaty obligations. So in effect, treaties create both legal and political tools, both internationally and at the domestic level. The story really wouldn't be complete, though, without recognizing the very peculiar role of the United States in international human rights. Americans have always thought they were exceptional. We have a role to play. We are a model of human rights practice. We can advocate for human rights. We can support human rights. We can make rhetorical claims. Sometimes we can even make our foreign aid or our trade conditional on improving human rights conditions. But you know what? We're exceptional. We don't need to commit ourselves to these treaties. We don't need to ratify treaties to be a good human rights model for the rest of the world. So the United States stayed outside of this treaty structure to a very great extent for a very long time. So traditionally, the United States has taken what some people have referred to as the flying buttress approach to the international human rights regime. We help to uphold it. We do that with our rhetoric, democratic assistance, sometimes political support. But while we try to uphold it, we don't go inside the church and become legally obligated. So the United States remains outside of agreements like the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. The United States is the only country in the world not to have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And so it's an unusual kind of a position that the United States has taken. We support rights, but we don't want to become committed, at least not in treaty form. So where are we now by the 1990s? The 1970s were a period of increased advocacy and organization. New treaties came online. They did begin to spread and become ratified. And by the 1990s, things were looking good for international human rights. Civil society had found its voice, both locally and internationally, and there were huge gains by the 1990s. Now, the 1990s ended the Cold War, and That was an important period for improvements in human rights.